I just spent 2 weeks in Japan, and today we're going over every single lens that I brought to help you decide what you should bring for your next content trip. Now if you haven't seen any of my Japan content yet, I was going with my friend Jadon, so it was a 2-person content team, but I'll also be going over what I recommend you bring if you're going to be solo creating. Now the first lens that we have is the Sony 16-35mm f2.8. Now this was my main vlogging and everyday lens. I really like this focal range because at 16mm, it's wide enough that you're able to get shots of yourself, which we particularly want to do because I want to do a lot of vlogging and also just create content with my face in it, so just shooting myself. So the 16mm range is very nice for that. But the 35mm range is also really nice because you're able to punch in a little bit. It's actually a pretty good focal length and a very popular one. A lot of people like to use it for environmental portraits, and when you get nice and close to things, it actually still creates a nice depth of field so that you're able to get some nice bokeh shots. This range is just super versatile, and everything in between 60 and 35 is going from an ultra wide to like an environmental portrait type of wide. And for Japan especially, because the scenery is so nice, I really want to make sure that I have something wide enough to capture the beautiful scenery there. This basically stayed on my camera for most of the trip. Now paired with that is the Sony 24-70 f2.8. Now this is more of a standard mid-range zoom lens, and this is what most people are actually using as an everyday lens. For 24mm, it's still pretty wide and you're able to get a lot of the scenery shots, but then when you punch into 70mm, it's really good for portraits, getting a lot more close detail shots. The minimum focus distance on this is actually really close as well, so you're able to get very nice blurry backgrounds and very close to objects, so if you want to do any kind of like macro shots, this is very good for that. I actually really like this focal length. My only gripe with this is that at 24mm, when I hold the camera out and I'm trying to vlog myself, it is a little bit tight, which is why I mentioned I prefer the 16-35. But if you're not going to be shooting yourself that often and you just want to shoot everything else around you, I actually do recommend the 24-70 over the 16-35 more. This lens is super light, super sharp, the autofocus is really good, and again, most people are going to be using this as their everyday lens, and if you're only going to choose one, it would probably be somewhere in the 24-70 range. Now none of the lenses here, including the Sony ones, have any sort of optical stabilization built into it, which to me is honestly fine because our cameras have stabilization built in, and if you haven't seen my A7 IV review yet, I have it linked at the top or down in the description below, but that camera also has the dynamic active stabilization, so it's like enhanced stabilization, and that kind of just makes it so that you don't really need stabilization in the lenses. Now the third lens that I brought is one of my favorites, and this is definitely more of a specialty lens. So this huge chonker is the Sigma 135mm f1.4. And yes, you heard that correctly. 135mm at an f1.4 aperture is insane. The images and videos that come out of this is just insanely special. You're getting such a long focal length at such a low aperture, everything just looks unreal. Now one of the biggest gripes is that this filter size is 105mm, and that's huge. You can literally see that the front of this element is bigger than this lens, like I could literally put this lens inside of this one. Now obviously this is going to be a lot more limiting because 135mm, it's going to be more used for outdoor shots, and when you're indoors, because it is such a longer focal length, it's going to be a lot harder to use indoors. So this is definitely more of an outdoor lens, but we actually use this a lot. But as you can see from these photos and images here, I love this lens. Now these three lenses here are what I brought out as my main kit. So 16-35 mostly on the camera, and then I'll swap between the 24-70 and the 135mm depending on what other shots I want. Now like I mentioned, I was traveling with Jadon, so this is what he brought in his kit. So his main vlogging lens was this lens, the Laowa 10mm f2.8. If you haven't seen this before, I've done a lot of videos on it. I'll also link this up here or down in the description below. But basically this lens is super wide. It makes for a super immersive field of view because it's so wide. 10mm is not something that you normally see, and with this lens you're actually not getting a lot of distortion, so it's not going to be a fisheye look, and everything just looks insane with this. Because we want to record ourselves doing things in Japan, we use this lens a lot as a BTS lens. Food was definitely super high on our priority of like things to do in Japan, so a lot of the times when we're eating and trying out new restaurants, we would have the 10mm set up on his camera, so we were able to have a super wide field of view and record ourselves eating. Now 10mm obviously is going to be a lot more limiting. It's not something that you can probably run around for like an everyday lens, but for just what we're trying to do, which is a lot of BTS, this is a perfect lens to use because it is so wide. Because we're doing a lot of stuff indoors, the 10mm is also great for that, obviously because it's so wide that you don't have to worry about not being able to get everything in the shot. So this is the main wide lens that he brought. Now, like I mentioned, you do need a mid-range lens when you're doing something like this and you want a lot of versatility. So the mid-range lens that he brought was the Tamron 35-150 f2 to 2.8. Now, I've also done videos on this lens. This is probably one of the most versatile lenses that you can ever buy. 35mm is still what I consider wide, although it is on like the longer length of a wide. So if you're trying to use this indoors, it's not going to be as good because it is still a little bit tight, but for like environmental portraits, stuff like that, it's going to be great. But the fact that in one lens, you can zoom all the way from 35 to 150mm, that basically makes it so that we don't need a longer focal length. We don't need something like a 70-200 because this lens has so much reach. Now you might be thinking, 150 it already covers the 135mm range, why do you need the 135mm if you have this lens? But that's because of the f1.4. So it just looks a lot different at f1.4, it just looks a lot more insane, but this is definitely still going to get you very nice bokeh. You're still getting some crazy shots even at 150mm, even though it's only at f2.8. Most of the time Jadon was using the 35-150 as his main lens that was on his camera. So basically these 5 lenses are what we both brought, and we would basically just switch back and forth and hand each other off lenses depending on what shot we're trying to get. So normally one person would have a wide lens and then the other person would have a mid-range or a longer focal length. And with that, we're able to just interchange lenses, be able to get a ton of variety of shots. Every single lens here is different, so you're still able to get a variety of shots, and it just makes it really nice to be able to capture everything that we want. Now I mentioned that all the lenses are different, but you're going to notice that we have 2 mid-range lenses here. I think that's because a mid-range lens is super important to be able to just have a lot of versatility. So we want to make sure that each of us, if we need to at the same time, would have a mid-range lens just so that we're not trying to fight over a single lens. For a 2-person team, I think this is probably what I would call the perfect setup. Now, I do want to mention we did bring a 24mm f1.4, which is actually what I'm shooting on right now. Now I don't have this here because we didn't use it a ton, but we mainly brought that lens because whenever we want to do a couple of nighttime shots, the f1.4 aperture was going to be super useful. Now this lens, like I mentioned, does go down to f1.4, but because it is 135mm, it is a lot more restricting, and the 24mm focal length is going to be a lot more versatile than this one. So we still want something that we're able to use in low light if we need to. We did bring it out a couple of times, but the reason why I don't have it here is because it wasn't one of our main lenses, and to us, for this specific scenario, the 24 was more of like a specialty lens just to get a specific shot. Now like I mentioned, this is probably like the perfect 2-person content team lens setup that we've done, but what if you're just solo traveling? If I was going by myself, I would probably do something like this. Now I'd probably do the 16-35 as my main wide lens. Now the 10mm, like I mentioned, I really do love it, but for the 16-35mm range, you're still able to shoot yourself at 16mm, but still zoom in to shoot anything that you want to see. So if you want to get some B-roll, stuff like that, this lens is going to be able to do that. The 10mm you can shoot yourself, but then when you're shooting B-roll or landscapes, everything is just going to be super wide, so it's not as versatile. Now you do need a mid-range lens, and it would basically be up to these 2 lenses of what you want. The 35-150 is a lot heavier, but it is going to be the more versatile lens, while the 24-70 obviously lighter, but not as versatile. I think this is mainly a preference thing. Do you prioritize less versatility but a lighter setup, or more versatility and a heavier setup? For me, I don't mind carrying heavier lenses usually, and I want to be able to make sure that I get the shot. So I'd probably bring the 35-150 as my main mid-range lens if I was just solo creating. And then you can actually see the benefits of this combo, 16-35 and 35-150. You're effectively covering the 16 to 150mm range in 2 lenses, which is actually nuts for solo traveling. I don't really see any other use that you can't get with these 2 lenses besides those specialty shots like a 10mm or a 24 for nighttime shots. Before this lens came out, it actually wasn't even possible to get this type of coverage. You normally need a 16-35, a 24-70, and a 70-200 to get everything from the super wide all the way to an ultra telephoto lens. But now with these two lenses, this is actually insane. These two, like I mentioned, 16 to 150mm range of coverage in just two lenses. And you're still getting f2.8 here, f2 to 2.8, so it is a variable aperture, but you can do f2.8 across the whole range. So basically you're getting 16 to 150mm f2.8. Now maybe there's some of you who want to pack ultra light, and if you're only going to pick one lens, I think it kind of depends on what you're trying to shoot. If you're mainly someone who likes to do a lot of like landscape shots, shooting the scenery, also shooting yourself, I'd probably do the 16-35 as my main lens because I want to be able to make sure that I'm wide enough to capture everything that I want. If you prioritize more like B-roll shots or you're doing street photography, stuff like that, I would probably take the 35 to 150 because 35 to 150mm is such a long range of coverage that this lens covers everything, which is insane. Now, like I mentioned, we spent 2 weeks in Japan and I was actually really happy with the setup. I don't think I would change a single thing, honestly, and I think next time whenever Jadon and I go on a trip, this is probably going to be the setup that we're running again. But I want to know, what do you think of this setup, and is there anything that you would change? Let me know down in the comments below. Obviously, if you have any other questions about this setup, let me know down in the comments below as well. If you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to see more photo video content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.